nice thing to remember. God give and forgive, people get and forget. But never mind, God was compromising, and compromise is a first step to living together in peace. Still, the people had in their heart the feeling that they are suspicious of everything. They are doubtful of everything. They don't believe in what you tell them. They are suspicious. And this the reason why a Jew asks so many questions. When you ask him a questions, he answered you by asking you many more questions. And that becomes part of the gene of Judaism. Now, the main idea, the main thing appeared when they went to Babylon. In Babylon, there were strangers in a new country. And the Babylonian helped them to do few things. The Babylonian created a sort of 10 kind of settlement, agricultural settlement, and they put them there. And one of the settlements' name, you will be surprised to hear, it is called Tel Aviv. The rest of the settlements, they have a bit complicated Aramaic names. Now, this community was destined to disappear unless there was a sort of a good leader. They have excellent leader in Ezekiel. The first thing that he did, he created the synagogue and he let them get together to feel themselves as a community, and they help each other. And this way he succeeded. How, why he succeeded? The reason was very simple. There was no money. So a farmer who had good crop and his neighbor had bad crop, the farmer gave his excess crop to his neighbor, expecting that one day his neighbor will reciprocate and give him back. So this created a sort of brotherhood among the Jews. And this continued on and on until money becomes a factor in the society. Then another leader, Ezra. Ezra said, the Bible is known by heart by the Levites, by the Kohanim. If the Kohanim get killed, now we are open, they are not protected. In the Holy Land, they were protected. But what is going to happen now? They are not protected. If they get killed, then we have no Bible. So he learned how to scribe the Bible from the Persian. In Persia, they have a Bible called Avesta, and it is recorded on calf skin with gold leaf. But he used calf skin, but with a sort of a black ink from the flowers of the cedar tree with olive oil. But it was written in a very nice way. It becomes traditional. There is no room for me, no time to tell you how it was written and how the Jews followed that. Now, because they have among them a sort of fear about what is going to happen, it came the idea that they have to develop in their own words the tree of knowledge. In other words, to take care of education. There were 3 yeshivas open in Baghdad that shaped up the future of the community. The system of teaching in this yeshiva was not to learn by heart, but to question every sentence that you read in the Bible. This way you have in and out questions, and people are involved and participated, and the new ideas are created. How these ideas are created? Very simple. After over 200-300 years, the Babylonian Talmud came into being. And the Babylonian Talmud is a sort of a treasure that the Jewish community of Babylon gave to the whole world. In the meantime, there were some things that we learned from the Babylonian and things that we did not want to learn from the Babylonian. We learned from the Babylonian their mathematics and their astronomy. There were first-class people in the whole world in astronomy. As a matter of fact, even their findings are used today. And not only that, but we learned of them the calendar, how they divided the week into 7 days, how they divided the months into weeks, and how the year is divided into months. The Hebrew words for the months that we use today are not Hebrew. They are Babylonian Kildani, and we adapted them. For example, the month of Ab, it's called in Kildanian Abu. We use Ab. The month Elul was called Elulu. We use the name Elul, and so on and so on. We learned a lot from them. What we didn't learn is very simple. They have no family concept. There is no marriage concept in Babylon. A person who is a farmer, for example, had a number of women working on his farm. When he's fed up with them, he ties them with a rope, take them to the market, auction them, and buy a new set. Now that was not accepted by the leaders of the community. We know from the very beginning that the family is the nucleus of society, and that woman is the nucleus of the family. And this was even in the blessing when God took Adam and Eve out of paradise. He told Eve, بتصاعرت الجبنين البالغ تشتققي وهو يمشال بخ. He used the word yimshal, not yimshol. Yimshol means he enslaved you. Yimshal means he used you as an example in the family. You teach your children all kinds of things. They have the tongue from you, the talk from you. You are an exemplary in the family. Therefore, the leaders of the community did not accept that and created the ketubah, the marriage contract. If you read the marriage contract in Aramaic, original one, without the changes that took over the years, you will find how responsible is a man for his wife. And not only that, but from that time, the man has to sing to his wife, Eshet Hayil Miyimtza, in the Kiddush of Friday night. And this is to give her the satisfaction and the appreciation that she is a major member in the family. Now, this is the society that will crystallize Judaism, because before that in the Holy Land, there was no prayers the same way we have. There was nothing that we call it a tradition, but now everything becomes known in the community, and the community becomes a unit, and the Torah was spread over in many countries. How this happened, how the Torah and the Bible written in Babylon and went to many countries. Very simple. The caravan that went to the Far East and the caravans that went to Europe were mostly owned and managed by Jews. So they used this method to transfer the copies of the Talmud, copies of the Torah to all these countries. And not only that, but in the archives of the Jewish community in Baghdad, they found an Igeret. Igeret is a letter exchange between the community of Baghdad and the community of Jews in other countries. There is one with the Jews of Ukraine. There was one with the Jews of Afghanistan. Now, having said that, we saw that the Judaism and the Jewish people becomes a sort of a group that can survive many changes. Therefore, Hashem Bahar, a community that he knows it is going to be survived, and it is written to the Bible. Why God did not pick up the big countries and the big leaders of the countries, but he only took the Jews, the small race, for a chosen people. He chose them to be chosen. They have the rules to be appreciated, and they appreciate rules, but they never worship rulers. They find out that principles are very important if they are just and the people follow them. Now, this is the survival is the name of the game. It is not the big leaders that he chose the small leaders. He wants to show that survival is not because of a strong muscle or a strong army. Survival comes because of the power of the spirit, the power of the spirit that the Jews had all the time and all the years, the faith that put in their heart and the faith that replaced fear from the times of slavery. I want to end this my talk by saying one thing. Almost 90 years ago, the famous Jewish poet Hayim Nahman Bialik wrote a poem, and I'm quoting 2 lines of that poem. He said, "Wayabo yom umiyam adyam, yabo ishtomimu ma pa'al katan bagoyim amdal." The translation is this, and there will come a day, and people will come from ocean to ocean to admire the achievement of this poor little race among nations. His prophecy is now true. If you go to Israel and see the development, so what he predicted is very good and it is true. This is a good example for the human brain that its creativity has no limit if you put him in the right environment. The right environment is freedom. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sami. Thank you so much, Sami, for your beautiful address. In a few sentences, I have 2 questions that were asked. If you could try to answer those 2 questions with a few sentences. First of all, what does Jewish identity mean to you? And how do you express your Jewish identity?
The Jewish identity is expressed in all the ways of life that we adopted. I can't hear you.
Mark, you have to mute yourself, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, very well.
Okay. Jewish identity is the example of Jewish identity is the way of life that we lead. It is the tradition, it is the prayers, it is the Bible. These are the Jewish identity. I want to say a few words here. We all pray. We all have bar mitzvah. We all have a tradition in the various kind of a blessing. But I want to ask a question. Do we know what is behind these prayers? Do we know what is behind these blessings that we read like a parrot? I asked this question to some religious people, and the answer was very discouraging. They said, well, my father is Jew, my grandfather is Jew, I follow the tradition, I pray. I said, what is behind the your prayer? He didn't know. And so what happened, if a person in our Jewish family doesn't understand, just read things as a parrot, does not understand what is behind the words, so slowly, the power of Judaism is going to be weaker and weaker. There is a message in every blessing that we have. There is a message in all what we do. It is a sort of optimism all the way through. I cannot go through the explanations. One day, maybe, I have the chance to explain it, but now, no. What we have in general is that the prayers and all the Judaic approach is to be pessimist. Don't be optimist. You cannot achieve anything by being pessimist. You can achieve many things by being optimist. You look in the future, you wake up in the morning, you bless God for creating you, and you find the doors open to you. There are a sort of a I would say, secret message behind all these prayers and all these tradition. One day, maybe I have the chance to explain it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sami. Beautiful presentation. Thank you for sharing. Very insightful. I'll let Sandra introduce our next speaker.
Carole Basri is joining us from Israel, and we're so grateful. It's like 2:30 a.m. her time. Carole Basri is visiting professor at the Peking University School of Transnational Law. She's president and corporate of the Corporate Lawyering Group, LLC. She's visiting professor at Pericles Law School in Moscow, Russia. She's chief advisor to the Association of Corporate Counsel Certification Program. I can go on and on, but it's 2 pages long here, and we want to listen to her more than me. So I'm just going to pick a few captions that I highlighted here. One thing that really caught my eye, she has served on the academic committee of Interpol, Anti-Corruption Academy from June 2007 until 11, where she has worked on creating a curriculum for addressing corporate corruption. Here I see in 2003, Ms. Basri was a member of the US State Department's Future of Iraq project. From July 2003 until July 2004, she was a member for the Coalition Provisional Authority with the Iraqi Reconstruction Development Council, IRDC, for Ambassador Bremer in Baghdad. She worked extensively on doing business, anti-corruption, and transparency issues in Iraq. She helped to draft legislation on these issues and met with all of the ministries in Iraq. She created the Doing Business Conference in Iraq at the Union League in New York. Going further, she was asked by Iraq Prime Minister Jafari to represent the Iraqi government in finding law firms and accounting firms to represent the Iraqi government in bringing oil for food litigation. She was instrumental in obtaining the oil for food documents from the Iraqi Board of Supreme Auditors for the UN Commission on Oil for Food, headed by Paul Volcker. And we can go on and on, but down here I read, in early 2008, Carole created and chaired the International Corporate Practice Conference at the Penn Club in New York City. On March 31, 2008, Ms. Basri was the moderator for a PLI teleconference on the global financial crisis. And on July 7, 2008, she chaired a PLI conference on the global financial crisis. On September 19, 2008, Ms. Basri moderated a session in the New York State Bar Association International Fall Meeting in Stockholm, Sweden, on the global financial crisis. And then here, finally, Ms. Basri is also a documentary film producer, and her films have been shown at film festivals at PBS. She produced a documentary on hemophiliacs in Iraq who got AIDS through tainted blood parts. She has advised on a pro bono basis a preparatory PBS production of Saddam's trial. She has been a commentary on the Iraqi elections and its constitution for MSNBC, CNN, Fox, Al Araqiya TV. Ms. Basri received a BA from Barnard College, Columbia University, and a JD from the New York University School of Law. And she is a dear, dear friend of the Spanish. And without further ado, Carole.
Thank you so much, Sandra, and thank you for inviting me. And I really like the Spanish synagogue in Montreal, and it's an honor to be speaking again with the synagogue. So I wanted to start by how foundational it is to know your identity. Before you can do anything else, you have to know who you are. That's the foundation of everything. And I think that because Avram, he wasn't Abraham yet, he was Avram when the Lord spoke to him, he asked him to leave his country, to leave your people, your father's household, and to go to a land so that I will show you, so that he could find his identity. And sometimes we need to find our identity. And so I want to go through the journey that I've taken, which you asked me to go through. But I want to find your identity, and then looking at the challenges that you face, then looking at what you find as your mission in life. And we can have several missions. And finally, that mission, if you're worthy of it, chooses you and you choose it. And you then transform the physical things you do in life into spiritual things. So, identity. For me, that was very important. I wanted to find out who I was from a young age and what it was to be an Iraqi and to be Jewish and living in America. And so all those things were very important. And that manifested itself in my going to Baghdad and being with Ambassador Bremer and the Iraqis that were there, and also in the documentaries that I started to do even before I went there, on my grandfather, on the Iraqi. I'm searching for where Jews from Iraq went, from India to Burma to Singapore, Hong Kong, and I want to thank Adriana Davis, who I've done these films with and produced them with and directed it with. But I went on that journey to try to find out, because if I can't find out who I am, how can I then meet the challenges of life and raise my children, my grandchildren, and really tell the story of this unique community? And I want to thank Sami, who did such a wonderful job of explaining the uniqueness of that community, and that it really created what were in biblical times temple-oriented religions, just as the Jews had the temples, and turned it into an extant religion that didn't need a temple, but through the sojourn in Babylon, which went on for thousands of years, but they quickly developed, as he said, a religion that was in the home, that was in the community where they were, and they weren't able to go on the pilgrimages to a temple, and very often there wasn't a temple there to visit, unfortunately. So creating that allowed Judaism to flourish beyond ancient times, and I think that was a great gift. And the gift was the gift of ethics and caring, and transforming the physical into the spiritual. So as you go on this journey of identity, which is one that I've been on, and I hope to continue to be on it, and discovering more and more things, because that's what we do. We learn. And I tell you where that journey took me because of that identity. But I need to thank my family for giving me an education, and that included a Jewish education, so that I would understand at an early age my heritage. And I tried to give that to my children as well, and they to theirs. I think it's very important that you provide this education as a foundation, and transmit the values and ethics that you have. And it's so important. whether you're Jewish or not, there are the 7 Noahide commandments. Whether or not you're Jewish, there are standards and ethics. And I do a lot of compliance training and anti-corruption training. I still that there are good people everywhere, and we have to look for that goodness. And we have to try to find our identity and then elevate that through the mitzvahs, through the Torah. So we all have a responsibility to that. And Lord Sachs spoke to that. So important to find your identity, and that identity will change as time goes on. We start as a child, we become a grown-up, we go to school, we gather identities, we get married, we have children. All of those things reflect on our identity. All of the people we know, the family, the friends, all of those are very important things. And as they say, it's important to surround yourself with people of high ethics, because then you will gravitate to doing the right thing also. Now, then there are the challenges, of course, in life. Knowing your identity, then you can deal with the challenge. I've had many challenges, as has everyone, because I think that, and this is something I heard from Dennis Prager, who you may have heard of. He's a thinker in the Jewish area. He's spoken quite a bit, and I heard him speak many years ago. And he said that everyone is in the emergency room, and that the only people he knows that aren't being challenged are people that he doesn't know well. In fact, he says the only people he knows that are happy are the people he doesn't know well. Well, in some ways, we have to look at that and say, Judaism is a religion of joy, but to find that joy, we have to decide on taking on these challenges, not complaining about them, but embracing those challenges. And if we do, we'll get more challenges, and each challenge will help us to grow as a person. I believe that one of my challenges was to go to Iraq. I was very scared to go. And while I was there, I was very scared many times. But it proved to be a very important piece of me growing as a person. And through that, I learned about the Iraqi Jewish archives, which is something that Sandra thought was worth mentioning at this point. I want to mention that I have been trying with a whole number of people. It's not just one person's effort, but many people's effort to try to keep the Iraqi Jewish archives in the United States and have it be able to go to Or Yehuda, to the Babylonian Heritage Center. And so I wanted to embrace that journey of trying to figure out a way to do it. And I've been involved in trying to keep them here. And also it involved doing recently a documentary, Saving the Iraqi Jewish Archives, which I did with Adriana Davis. I just want to mention that it was a challenge to put it together. It was a challenge to work on this with various people from the State Department, from the National Archives, with the Iraqi government. And I'm really hoping, and I ask for your prayers and good wishes, that we are able to keep it. This is a very important time in this saga. And what I learned through that is that once you open that door, you learn more things. And I remember learning, I guess in 2017, about 3.5 years ago, about memorandums of understanding that were signed to send things back to other countries that had things that were people that were ethnically cleansed, and sending their things back, including Jews, to places like Syria, Egypt, Algeria, Yemen, Libya. I mean, some of these are failed states. And you have to ask, are those things ever going to really be preserved? Shouldn't they be preserved by the people who were ethnically cleansed? In our case, the Iraqi Jews. We should be entitled to those archives, not only because it stands with international law, and I'm just going to mention the international laws involved, but the international law would be the Universal Declaration of Rights, Section 17 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which the US and Iraq were signatory to, talks about the fact that everyone has a right to their property alone as well as in association with others, and that nobody shall be arbitrarily deprived of the property. So many of you are Iraqi Jews, and you know that when you left Iraq after 1948, usually 50, 51, 52, or maybe in the later portion when Jews left after 69, 70 with the hangings, that we were not allowed to leave with anything except 3 sets of clothing and 50 dinars. So it's very, very important that our cultural heritage not be sent to Iraq, but should remain where the Jewish Iraqi Jews are, and that's outside of Iraq where people can view it. So from a group of 165,000 Jews who lived in Iraq in 1948, there are now less than 5 Jews remaining. In the Middle East, where the Arab League says that in 1948, there were 1 million Jews in the Arab countries. That doesn't include the Jews that were in Iran and Turkey and places like this. But in Arab-speaking countries, these Jews, there were 1 million. There are maybe 4,000 Jews left. So it's very important that we preserve that, especially since we were ethnically cleansed from these countries, and that we defend the rights of people who are Christians, Chaldeans, Yazidis, Coptic Christians, Baha'i, all these people who are ethnically cleansed from the Middle East or are being ethnically cleansed, and protect their right to their religious and cultural heritage. And I only learned that because of looking into my identity and finding out about what happened to the Iraqi Jewish archives. And then pursuing that led me to have people come and talk to me about these memorandums of understanding with the State Department, which we're trying to overturn. And so that kind of created taking on that challenge and trying to transmit that history through documentaries and speaking. I've spoken at many college campuses, including places like Princeton, Columbia University, the University of Tennessee, and a number of others, brought me to the point where I think it's important that we talk about the mission that I was on. And hopefully, I'm just going to conclude in a minute, hopefully we are honoring what Rabbi Sachs talked about, the dignity of diversity. Each of us is different. We each have each come from different communities, different heritages, but as Jews and frankly, as human beings, we need to protect that history, the religious and cultural history of our people. And we need to take these missions and turn them into something spiritual. And that's where we get to the chosen people. Once we have our identity, once we find our challenges or the challenges find us, then we go on a mission to conquer them. And then truly we choose, and we have been chosen to do this. And I think that's the legacy of what we are as Jews, as chosen people. It's not to get more, it's to give more, to be a light unto the nations. And I think that it's very important that we acknowledge that as a Jew, we need to be grateful that we've been given this purpose in life, because that's what each of us has, a purpose. Each is unique, and none of us are strong enough or smart enough to do it on our own. But with the values of Torah, with the mitzvot, and with the sense of unity and sense of ethics, we can go on to do the right thing. Thank you so much. Hello?
Thank you so much, Carole.
Thank
That was
you.
beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your personal journey with us. I have a question from someone, and then we could open the conversation, and encourage people to send in your questions now on the chat if you have any question to Carole or to Mr. Sami Sourani. So the question is there a single event in your life that strengthened or challenged your challenge your Jewish identity?
Was there a single? I don't know. There were several events. When I was growing up, I lived in a community that didn't have very many Jews, and I lived just off a restricted golf course that you couldn't go on if you were Jewish. And in school, I was told that I had killed Christ, and I remember that vividly. And as a young child, that's a lot to take on. So then I was in the Jewish community, and I would explain when I went to Hebrew school, which was in another town, that I was Jewish and that we had manna sema, manna from heaven. And I was a little bit ridiculed because they said, no, that's only in the Bible. You can't have it. I said, no, we have it whenever we have a happy occasion, an engagement, a wedding, there'll be some manna. It's my favorite thing in the world. And I actually brought my mother in with some manna so that they could understand what we were talking about. But the gulf for me was so broad because here I was growing up as, the only Jewish child in school in my class, and then growing up in, a synagogue where there were no other Sephardic Jews. And so I felt very isolated, and instead of blending in, I wanted to find out what my real identity was and cherish it. And so I think that those were fundamental events that challenged my identity, and things like that they either strengthen it or weaken it. In my case, it strengthened it. Hello?
Yes, great. Thank you. I think we have Mr. Rahad. Thank you very much for that answer. That was very insightful. We have Mr. Rahad Kasim that would like to ask the question. Please, Mr. Kasim, if you could unmute yourself and address your question.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My question was, in fact, congratulations for your speech. My question was really to Mr. Sami Sourani. I don't know if I'm out of order. May I ask Mr. Sourani a question, or?
Yes, of course.
No, I would like to know what is Sami's question, Sami or Mr. Sourani. I would like to know his view on the question of the Jewish identity. In his opinion, it's an open question to everybody, really. Is it a singularity for Jews, or I'm asking not knowing really the answer. I'm really asking in an open heart. Is the being a Jew and the message that and the talk of Mr. Sourani, and perhaps even your talk as well, is this Jewish identity with its features, is it a singular thing amongst other faiths and religions? Is there any singular aspect in it? This is my question. It's open to Mrs. Basri or Miss Basri and to Mr. Sourani and to...
You want me to start?
You can. Yeah.
Sure.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Well,
Yes, we hear you.
Judaism is a way of life. We became very conscious of our feeling because we were not treated properly in many countries, especially in Iraq. So I think any minority that feel a bit not treated equally, that minority feels it is, secluded and identify itself as a minority that belongs to that group.
So if I could answer, I think that the idea of being chosen is, and I think that's what you're getting to. I think it's a responsibility. And it's a responsibility you can take on or not take on. Are you going to take on because are you Torah? Are you going to take on trying to be useful, helpful human being, a quote unquote light unto the nations? If you're going to do those things, you choose to do that as well as being chosen to do that. And I think each of us has choice in their lives. And that's why I think starting with identity is so important, because if you look upon yourself that way, then I believe God looks upon you that way. But it's a choice that you make. And that's why it's so important that you examine yourself and examine the challenges you have and how you can make those challenges work for you in the mission that you have to do as a good person in the world. And every human being has this mission because we were all created in the image of God, in the image of Hashem. And that is a guiding principle of Judaism, that every human being is in the image of God. And that's very beautiful. So we're all, in a sense, chosen for something special. And whether we choose to follow the 7 Noahide commandments, which are you don't steal, you set up a government, you have, you don't commit adultery. They're very simple things. But you have a justice system. But you choose to do those things. And if you choose to do them, then you're chosen. That's how I look upon it. And I'm grateful because it's made me personally strive to be a better person. I don't know that I'll ever achieve what it means to truly be chosen, but I was going to try to do my best, which is why it was so important for me to go to Iraq and to help to try to found a better place without Saddam Hussein. Because for me, you said what were some fundamental things. One of the things was that my uncle Mir Basri, and his daughter is on the line, Muna, was in Qasr al-Nahaya being tortured during the time of the hangings for over 3 months. And I was sitting in the United States getting, the finest education and the easiest life. And I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even go to protest in front of the UN because we were too scared it would hurt my uncle. And in fact, he was being tortured during that time for standing up to Saddam and saying he was going to go to the press and talk about what was happening to the Jewish community. He was truly a great, great man. And so the more I learned, the more I understand. He chose that mission. It wasn't easy. He did it because it was the right thing to do. And that was a pivotal thing in my life.
May I add, whatever you said, especially the first portion, is correct. If a person lives in a normal environment, in a free environment, yes, you can say with all kinds of self-confidence, I belong to this group, I can do this, I can do that. I grew up in Baghdad, where we were afraid to say that we are Jews. How can I stand and say before people, I am a Jew, I have a mission to accomplish, I have to contribute to the society that expelled me. That's the difference. If we are living in a normal environment, a free environment, fine. Everyone has the right to stand and say, here I am. But if you are living in a society like the one we had in 1946, 47, 48 in Baghdad, we were afraid to say we are Jews. So the identity was forced on us to be different because we were persecuted.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of our beautiful speakers. I have a question and also a comment. First, a question for Carole. I remember at another Zoom where you were talking specifically about the archives, and I'm also I'm an archivist, so I should know something about the importance
Absolutely.
of archives as identity. It's speaking to who we are, and going back to what Rabbi Sachs said, the difference between history and memory. So my question to you is, you really endorsed a comment that I made on another chat, that would you consider presenting this argument, which I'm going to say in a second, in terms of why we don't necessarily have to give up our archives to go back to, like you say, these are failed states and we don't know how they will be taken care of. Could you place the argument that the Kuwaiti brothers, they created the popular music in Iraq after the formation of the State of Israel, and when most of the Iraqi Jews fled and there's hardly anyone left? Could you present this, that the memory of the Kuwaiti brothers and all the musicians who created the popular culture in terms of the musical art, they have been erased from the history? Nobody in Iraq today knows who they were because they have been categorically taken out of the history. So that talks to identity. And if they are not willing to accept that as our identity, then how is it legal to claim that our archives belong to Iraq's heritage if they don't want to keep the cultural contributions as part of the cultural currency? And the other comment I had was about chosenness. Is, I read somewhere that actually this cab driver in Israel was asked, how come you consider yourself as chosen? He said, God did not choose us, we chose him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in terms of the question of identity, Rabbi Sachs, he makes it very clear. He says, non-Jews are embarrassed by Jews who are embarrassed by their faith. And instead of listening to the background noise and the fear that has been instilled in us, we ought to read more our Torah and read more our heritage and know who we are through learning. And that's how we can stand tall. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I think we have a question from Rosie Sharabani. If Rosie, you want to mute yourself and ask your question. Rosie.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I loved your two speeches. Carole and Sami, thank you. I'm a 54-year-old Iraqi Jew, and I heard stories from my mom who grew up in Baghdad. And to be honest, it's only now in my life that I'm completely obsessed with what her background was. I guess growing up in a free society, I was not suppressed. I was exploring different other people's stories, but now it's particularly about our own heritage. And I wanted to ask you, Carole, is there, just like just like people told stories of the Holocaust, is there any way that we can record our own parents and possibly the older generation to talk to us about their experiences in Baghdad? Because I know you're talking about archives, but we have live stories and archives that are not going to be around. And is there any concerted effort to start recording those? And point number two, the way we were brought up with my mother and my father, and everyone is going to relate, the biggest thing that I have as an Iraqi is really food. I mean, food is so central to us as an identity, like more than anything in a way, if we're brought up in North America or like as we assimilate, those are the things that we hang on. What can you do, you guys in the power positions, to preserve this for us and so we can hand it down to our children? And thank you so much, both of you. I really love to hear your talks.
Well, let's start with food. So I've been teaching cooking courses over the last 25, 30 years with the 92nd Street Y. I did a chapter. I'm working on a cookbook now. I love cooking. And I think it's a wonderful way to transmit things, especially when you don't have things that would be considered religious and cultural heritage. We don't have Kiddush cups that get handed down because we couldn't bring them. So, I always looked upon people that had antiques that had been passed down as so fortunate, because most of us didn't really have that. We might have a piece of jewelry, but even that was smuggled out of the country. And, there's one piece of jewelry for 5, 6 different members of the family. So it just doesn't happen. So food is the way it goes. But I'm thrilled by that, because I see that that's one thing that lasts a long time and creates a bond. So learning more about the cooking and what it means is so important. As for the beginning of your question, and if you want to paraphrase that again, the first part of it, before the cooking.
Sorry.
How do you preserve this whole history? If you want to do histories, Sephardic Voices is one group. Beit HaTzvaot in Israel is keeping oral histories. So is Or Yehuda. So is Sephardic Voices in the United Kingdom. I suggest that anybody that's interested immediately go and record, your mother or whoever. We all have cameras now. We all can get an inexpensive recording machine, or we could get somebody to come into our home and do it, set up interview questions, and plan on doing a 2-hour interview. People open up to an interview much more than they do just sitting down with you and telling stories. They take it seriously, and it opens up a whole thing. Now, you can then take that recording and give it to all these different places that I mentioned, because when they do it, it's a little more cumbersome, but they may be interested in doing it as well. So this shouldn't stand in your way. The other thing is that children get projects in school where they have to do a family tree, family stories. And that started me doing what I'm doing, because I remember sitting down with my grandfather, Frank Iney, and asking him to do a family tree with me. And I learned a lot from him. And he knew that I cared about the history of the family. And then later on, he said, Carole, I want you to write a biography. And I never got to do it with him, but he wanted me to write down his story of his life. So I ended up doing it in the films later on. But I think it's very important. If you have this desire, do it as soon as possible, because already from saving the Iraqi Jewish Archives, my most recent film, which just recently came out in the last few months. I mean, there are so many people that are not with us now, including my uncle, Joe Eney, who I adore, and and his son, David Eney, who are now lost to COVID. So, and I'm so glad I have those interviews, because the interview I did with my uncle, Joe Eney, that was November 30th of last year. So it's 11 months ago.
Sorry.
And he's integral to the whole saving the Iraqi Jewish archives, because it turns out that a good part of the archives are from the Franchini School, my grandfather's school. And he was the right person to talk about who owned those archives. And it's our family. And we want to donate it to a museum, but we don't want somebody else telling us where to send it, because it is our personal property. It's not even communal property, because my grandfather paid for the school himself. And my uncle, was very clear that that is what happened. I've been very clear because I did my first documentary on the school in 1995, and it was in the New York Sephardic Film Festival. So this is, not pulling a string from nowhere. This is something that documented long before we went ever into Iraq. So do it, because you don't know what's in those memories that will touch a child, a grandchild, a friend. And because you've done it, you have that piece that can touch them.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Carole. It's so nice to be able to see you. Thank you.
My
May
pleasure.
I ask a question?
Sure.
Janet from Israel.
Yes.
Well, I'm asking about our dear things that we left behind, like the tomb of Prophet Ezekiel, our holy places that were very dear to our ancestors, and they kept them and saved them. Are we doing something to preserve them? UNESCO thing or something? Anyone is dealing with this?
Oh, she just answered that.
Well, we are dealing with the cemeteries. As you know, we had a remembrance for the cemeteries, and the cemeteries were trying to pay people to go in and clean in Iraq, but in Baghdad. But it's very hard to find the names, to catalog everything, and they actually turned over one of the major cemeteries and built on top of it. So it's really very difficult. If we can't even keep archives that are in the United States, it's very hard for us to try to preserve any of these important tombs like El Kifel, or we are at the mercy of the fact that it is in places that we do not have an ability to do anything over.
Okay.
Am I on? Thank you so much to all of our listeners. You really brought us so much joy, because we want to continue. This is a whole year, let's remember, of honoring the memory and of Rabbi Sachs and lifting up his soul by listening to his words and studying his teachings. Next session will be on Thursday, January 28th. We're going to have Cantor Daniel Ben Lolo of our synagogue, and Cantor Eyal Biton and his beautiful wife, Michelle Treasure, of Congregation Neve Shalom in Portland, Oregon. They'll be singing together for us. And we're there, speaking to God, prayer. Rabbi Pinto told me that is the job of the cantor. So there we went. After that, we're going to have our wonderful immediate past president, Edmond Elbaz, who is a very erudite, very learned educator himself. He has the Order of France in Arts and Letters. He was the Délégué Général to l'Alliance Israélite Universelle from Canada, and he will speak about study, listening to God. And there's more, but
Please join us.
please join us for
First
all
all,
of
for
those.
the next one is January, what did you
So
say?
January
Thursday, January 28th.
28th at 7 p.m. There was one more thing I wanted to say, is that thank you, Rabbi, for giving us this opportunity. And the last thing I want to say is that Rabbi Sachs's message to us Jews all over the world, his only wish was to get us to unite, not Orthodox, conservative, whatever you have, but just simply as Jews. And the reason why this program is being done with so much emphasis here at the Spanish is because I really feel, and I know the rabbis behind me, that we are one big United Nations under one single roof. And we don't call ourselves anything but a three-letter word, Jew. So that's the message we want to share with the bigger world of Jewry, that we can all spend the next year in these difficult circumstances uniting as Jews and understanding how beautiful it can be when Shevet Achim Gam Yaha, when we sit together and we learn together. That was his penultimate message. So if we do this, we would be honoring him and we would be lifting his soul to Gan Eden.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you for all the speakers. We hope to see you next time in our next session on Thursday, January 28th. Please register. We look forward to seeing you again and sharing many more things with you, commemorating Rabbi Sachs and bringing and strengthening our identity. And like Carole Basri mentioned, knowing yourself and is your starting point. And once we identify our identity, we could go to the next level and to the next units of prayer, mitzvot, and learning Torah. We hope to see you next time. Enjoy and thank you all again for being here.